Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of the Honest Plan Podcast. I'm your host, Tiana Hicks, and today I am joined by Viv of the VO Guide, who is a brand strategist, and she also teaches everyone how to tell stories that actually convert into customers, and that's what we all want. That's why we are all in business, to actually make money. So, Viv, thank you so much for joining us. Feel free to
I'm
introduce yourself.
honored. I mean, you've already done the introduction. I feel like I don't need to say anything else,
Girl, you
but
are much more
no,
than
thank you
that.
for, I mean, it's, y'all, sometimes I say that, like, especially when you're considered, like, obviously we are all multi-passionate. That's the way the Lord, that's how,
Yeah.
that's what the Lord deposited in us. And so sometimes I'm just like, what do I call myself? Like, I have so many things, but I mean, that's basically it, like brand strategist, do content. That's the whole storytelling piece. But honestly, if you come on my page, you read my content, John my lives, there's always a story. Read my emails, like that's just what I'm about. And I always try to encourage and challenge people to like build their brands on their story, on their experience, because it's very easy to learn from someone else and think that's what you got to spit out. And unfortunately, sometimes that's what you learn in this space. But yeah, that you come to me, you hire me, you work with me, you consume my content, I'm always pushing you to do be yourself
Yeah.
because that's what's sustainable.
Love it. So tell us, so what got you to be where you are today, to becoming a brand strategist and teaching people how to tell stories? Because I actually listened to a podcast that you were on maybe 2 years ago. I like to just do background, like I
Yes.
just like to do some research on people before they get on the podcast. So I listened to a podcast episode that you did maybe 2 years ago, and you talked about what you actually wanted to do, which was become a
Yes.
doctor. You thought you were going to become a doctor.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. Whew. That's just an interesting story. But yes, I wanted to become a doctor. That was, I mean, well, I'm Nigerian, so let me also preface that. Like,
Yeah.
so if you are Nigerian, if you're listening to this, you could probably relate. There's just certain professions that our parents, especially our culture, feels that is more like very profitable. Things are changing now, obviously, with the digital age.
Yeah.
But yes, I wanted to become a doctor. I thought I wanted to become a doctor. And funny enough, like I could also, if I, because I say hindsight is 2020, right? So if I even think back to 2013, that was the fall semester of my senior year, I took an intro to global health. And I remember sitting in the class and the teacher was doing a difference between a public health professional and a doctor, like a physician. And she was like, a physician works with one patient at a time versus a public health professional or a global health professional per se does community work. So their impact is on a larger scale. And it was just like something in me in the class. I was like, that sounds more like what I want to do. I'm like, I don't mind the one person at a time, but I was
Yeah.
like, the global scale, the community, I was like, that spoke more to me. And mine just was my senior year. I was already applying to medical school. I'd already taken the MCAT twice and bombed it. So it was completely terrible.
Yeah.
But I was just like still on this desire and this dream. So yeah, it was since 2014 when I graduated up until it was 4 years of like getting my MPH, so Master's in Public Health, because I was like, okay, cool. If medical school is not going to take me, let me get my master's at least in public health. But I was still like on this journey of wanting to become a doctor. So I was still taking the MCATs. I still spent thousands of dollars to apply to medical school. I applied 3 times, took the MCATs 4 times. And it was 2018 October, actually, yeah, this month,
Yeah.
27th of October, where I was just like, you know what? We're good.
Yeah.
We're done. Like, we're not doing this anymore. And
Yes.
by that time, like Instagram was already up. I was already traveling with my now husband, then boyfriend.
Yeah.
Don't do that, Christian, just skip past that.
Yeah.
But we were traveling, and a lot of people kept asking me about like, oh, like how do you travel? You guys travel so much. We would take like multiple trips a year, different countries. Like, oh, how do you plan your trips? Like all of that great stuff. And so literally I remember the day when we had just gotten back from India when I got the results for the last test, like for the last MCAT test that I took. Didn't really do much to the test, did not increase. Mind you, I spent whew, summer 2018, I will say, was the most like depressing, treacherous, like it was such a summer where I was literally like training for a marathon. So I
Mhm.
also ran the Chicago Marathon. I was working full time.
Yeah.
In the evenings, I was taking MCAT classes with the Princeton Review. So literally, I would wake up at 4 o'clock to go run with my running group, come back, go to the gym, get to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, finish work at 5, run to basically the Princeton Review class that was literally down the street from where I worked. And so I would take a walk there. 6 o'clock it would start till 9 o'clock. I would leave, get home at 9:30, try to study, get to bed at 10. Same thing, on and on and on. And um, yeah, it sounds very stressful, right?
Yeah.
when I
I'm like, you had
when
me
I
at
think back at
marathon.
that point,
I like to work out, but
girl,
running and all that, I can't.
I mean, I see, I love a good challenge. And I
Yeah.
was bored in the gym, and my brother had randomly texted our group chat that he ran a half marathon. So I was like, I want to run one too. Like, that was how I was a few
Yeah.
years ago. I mean, I admire that Viv that was just like, oh, let's do it, and just like
Yeah.
goes for it. But that's basically the whole gist of like, yes, wanting to become a doctor, and I just that didn't work out. It was just,
Yeah.
yeah, girl.
Love it. Love it. So, and so many people would look at not doing well on the actual
Yeah.
standardized test to, okay, I'm a failure. And like just
Hmm.
like give up and accept that that's all life has to offer. But the
Yeah.
main thing that I love about your story is that you took like one closed door and like figured out and did more work to see, okay, well, what is God trying to tell me? Like, what exactly do I need to be? Because what we know, definitely as believers, that won't close one door and not open another. So sometimes it
Exactly.
just kind of takes that searching on, like, okay, well, what's next? And some people look at that journey as something that's scary, but if
Yeah.
just lean into it, it can be like fulfilling and
Yeah.
just not knowing what will come next.
Exactly. No, it's funny because I was talking to a friend last night, and I'm 29 now, so I'm about to turn 30 next year, in January. But I was like, wow, like my whole 20s has been this whole self-discovery journey of
Yeah.
like thinking I was going to become one thing, like I was going to become a doctor, I was going to go to Nigeria and become
Yeah.
minister of health and do all this stuff to, you know, medical school not working, going for an
Yeah.
MPH. That was like, okay, cool, great. Working, at Penn for a bit as a project manager, program manager, doing great work for 3 years, moving on for that to be a consultant, and then basically finding this creative path as an entrepreneur. And I'm just like, not in my wildest dreams did I think that this journey was going to like unfold the way it did.
Yeah.
But obviously, during the journey, there were moments of like, what is going on? This was not part of the plan. This was not what I thought life was going to be. And
Yeah.
mind you, I'm what you'd call like type A. Like, I plan my future. By this age, I'll
Yes.
be married. By this age, I'll be a doctor. By all these things, and then to come to, I think then I was, so 2018, I was how old? Gosh, can't do math. Like what, 25 years old.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is not what I planned for my life, like at this stage I was supposed to be a doctor. And that's the thing, right? Is like, I can't, when I think back, it was honestly just like, what's next? Like, and that's the thing, like I give props to Viv then, that was just like, even when things seemed scary, even when there was a challenge, I was just like, okay, what's next? Honestly, that night when we came back from India and I saw the results, I was like, it was almost like okay, cool, what's next? I didn't even cry, and I'm a crier, I'm very emotional, but I didn't even cry that night. I was just like, all right, cool. Even like my husband was just like, you're not crying, why aren't you crying? I was like, I
I've
don't know,
cried
like I
enough.
got tired.
I've cried
And you
enough.
kind of get that was literally what it was. I was like, I was just tired of all, like, putting in all the work. It was clear to me that it wasn't it. And obviously, looking back, I'm always honest with this. Looking back, I had a knowing that medical school wasn't for me. I
Mm.
didn't follow it. Like, I knew, like, there was something that in me that knew that like it wasn't going to work out.
Yeah.
But because I was so hung up on, I have to do this because everybody's looking at me. Mind you, like, I was, a student commencement speaker in college, and everybody thought me was going to become a doctor. So it was almost like that I allowed the outside pressure of what people thought or knew me as, or what I was supposed to do, to convince me to keep going on this journey. And not saying that like I didn't want it, I did, but that's why we also have to check our motives and our desires. Like, do I really want this? Or do I want it because my parents want it for me? Do I want it because my friends want it for me? Do I want it because others want it for me? And the truth is, with entrepreneurship, as much as people were asking me to start a blog, give them tips and all that stuff, I started the brand because I wanted to. It was
Mm.
just like, all right, cool, let's try this. Like, it is what
Yeah.
it is. Like, it could fail, it could not.
Yeah.
I had a job. I wasn't like hungry to make money to start out, right? But that was the thing. I had a knowing that it might not work out. And I would even tell you the reason why I even made a decision to take the MCATs the fourth time, that 2018, was, I think it was sometime in February. I was working in a clinic, and I was walking past what it called, the waiting area. And of course, this older lady, very sweet, was like, "Oh, are you the doctor?" I was like,
There you go,
"No."
God. Are
I
you
literally,
speaking
I was like,
through
"Oh,"
her?
I was like,
Are you
"Are you
speaking?
saying something,
God, are you
Lord?"
speaking? Yeah.
No, he
Because
wasn't speaking to
we
me.
think that we want something to happen, like I was in Bible study one day and someone said, when you have already like created a desire in your own heart, you will take anything as a sign for God.
Anything.
And he's like, no,
Yeah.
the lady is just
Yeah.
asking you a question. Like, I'm not saying anything, like,
Yeah.
not speaking
Yeah.
to
That
her.
was
Like,
it. That
yeah,
was it. And I literally went back to my desk and I was like, Lord, is that you speaking? Like,
yeah,
and obviously I didn't pray about it. I didn't even ask for
yeah,
confirmation. I didn't wait. I was like, nope, went back home. I was like, babe, we're doing this. Like, we're
yeah, yeah,
so even then I knew that wasn't God. And that's the thing, right? The Holy Spirit is always like, God, the Lord is always speaking. The Holy
yeah,
Spirit is always nudging you and letting you know like it's a yes or it's a no.
yeah,
But are we quiet enough to actually listen? And for me, like you said, I already created that desire in my heart.
yeah.
But
I love
yeah.
it. I love the story. I love it. I love it. So I know people are like so amped up for this conversation because I have a lot of people that listen
Yeah.
to the podcast that are kind of like on the edge of their seats. I'm like, okay, I want to build
Yeah.
a business. Don't really
Yeah.
know where to start. I don't know what I'm
Yeah.
good at. I don't know if people will, resonate with me. And the biggest thing
Yeah.
that I end up seeing why a lot of people's business don't do well starting off is that we don't tell good stories, or we don't even know how to. We don't know
Yeah.
like what to do. So we'll be like putting up a new service and like buy now, and like that's all the caption says and all these different hashtags. So
Yeah.
what is something that you tell someone, I guess, when you're crafting what their brand story should be or should
Yeah. Yeah. So there's always three main things that I always try to work with. And obviously, like, the reason why people do the whole like um by now where they post like, oh, this is a story, this is, I'm not saying like posting this is the way you can work with me in
yeah,
October or November, like I'm not saying that's wrong,
yeah,
but if you haven't necessarily like built any anticipation with value to actually show that you know what you're talking about, no one has really like trusted you in it. And so what I always tell people, like, to build their brand story around whatever it is that they are, building, whatever product or service it is, to always start with what was that moment that you realized this was the idea or the brand that you were going to build. And so for me, my story is always that October 27th when I was like, you know what, it is what it is. I'm tired, I'm
yeah,
good, I'm done, bye med school, like let's figure out something else. But also depending on what you're putting out, there's a reason why. There was a moment that happened, that came to you, that you worked through, that basically said, or that you noticed, or you came to, where it was like, oh, this is the reason why I'm going to build this thing,
yeah.
right? And it's always coming from something you experience. And that's why I said, like, a brand or a service or a product without a story, I would question if your heart and your mind, and there's a lot, like, I would question the depth of what it took for you to actually build that. And if
Yeah.
you truly care about the person that that is going to use that, you're going to serve with that. So after figuring out like that, that moment I call the inciting incident, like that, what was that moment? What happened that caused you to say, okay, you know what? This is a solution that I can offer because, like, I've overcome this, or I learned this, or whatever. The next thing is to also start mapping out what it took you. What was that journey like? Because 9 times out of 10, your journey is going to mirror the person that you're trying to serve.
Yeah.
right? Exactly what you went through is going to mirror that person. The only difference between you and the person you're serving is you're already on the other side. They're
Yeah.
still trying to figure it out. And so, what are all the things that happen and the thoughts that you had on that journey? And in the third part, you have to communicate what the vision is that you're going to take people on. Even if it's like, I have this content strategy VIP day, how did you realize this was the thing that you wanted to build? Why a content strategy VIP day?
Yeah.
You know, what did you figure out? Like, what was that journey like when you were putting it together? What observations did you make about the people who were struggling with their content, the people you spoke to? And then now tell me the vision of what I'm going to get out of this if I do buy into you. And I think that's usually always the missing piece with people when they're trying to put a service out or a product out, is they really miss out on telling that concrete story, because sometimes they feel like, well, who's going to care about that? No, people need to trust you in
Yeah.
order to put it out. The reason why we buy Nike and why everybody's like buying into Fenty or whatever other products are there is we've seen there's a perception we've built about these companies over time. It's a reason why certain companies sell out. Is the reason why when they, push a certain product, we buy it. It's not because they're the only option, but it's because there's a perception that we've built based on the story they've been telling for a while. And so you can't come out of thin air and expect somebody to buy. Maybe somebody might, not saying nobody will, but have you built trust with the story? Have you built a perception up with your audience to say, hey, Tiana is the best person to actually help me with this because I've seen what she's talked about. She's talked about her story. She's talked about her experience. And one thing I also like to say about a story, it's less about the story that you're telling. It's more about what the person is doing with the story. Can they put themselves in the story? Right. And so if I'm talking about, going through, having multiple content ideas and not really knowing how to organize it. So I built a content plan for myself. It's less about me, right? Having multiple ideas and being overwhelmed. It's more about somebody else saying, that's me. Like, can you help me organize it? Like, how did you build it? What did you do? What did you think about? Like, it's more about the person putting themselves in your story. That's the reason why we tell stories. It's not about us. It's for the person so they can actually perceive you or perceive your story as like almost like a mirror. Like it's like they're looking in the mirror, like, yo, that's me. I've experienced that too. It's the reason why we talk about the whole emotional pull and all of that. So yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And actually this morning, so I have already read the book, Building a Story Brand. I
Mm-hmm,
read
mm-hmm.
that maybe a couple of months ago, but I realized like I didn't take any notes when I was reading it. So I started rereading it actually this
Yeah.
morning. I actually started listening to it on the Audible. And was taking a lot of notes. And one thing that he talks about that really stood out to me, and I feel like you just kind of touched on it, is that you're not the hero in the story. The
Yeah.
customer is the hero and you're the guide. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's, how can I help you? Because I mean, one thing that he talks about is that everyone wakes up and they are the star of their own show. So
Yeah.
no one is going to read a long post of why you're so great and why you
Mm-hmm.
accomplished X, Y, and Z, but they want to
Mm-hmm.
know why this works for them. Is that right?
Yes, yes, yes. And I love build a story brand. And I think, when we think about it, I know he built it mostly for people who are like building websites, but it's even more about like the stories, also like how you tell it. It's the reason why we say when you're writing a story, you're not saying it's not I. And even if you do use I language and you talk about it from your own perspective, you also bring it it's like you're bringing the people into the story. And that's why we use you language a lot in our
Mm,
captions. The reason why you have to do that, because
yeah.
even if I tell a story and I talk about, let's say, trying to, let's say, prepare for Black Friday, and I'm not 100% sure like what my campaign should look like, and so I had to go on, just maybe you're trying to promote like a, I don't know, a Black Friday, prepare your Black Friday campaign or something like that, or whatever it is, so just make something up. And I'm basically talking about my own experiences and how I perfected my Black Friday campaigns that probably people have seen over and over and over again. And
Yeah.
so I can go into the fact that, like, I went on Google, went on Pinterest, went on this, and I was like, you've probably done the same thing too, researching campaigns, looking up all the different campaigns, trying to mirror what Nike is doing, but you don't have the budget to do it. Well, let me help you actually build a brand or build a campaign that can actually make you money from right, from your Black Friday campaign. So it's also in the way that you say certain things, in the way that you tell the story, that allows the person, like you say, instead of you being the star, for them to be the star. Because, and it's funny because I talked about it today, it's like when it feels very, and it's not bragging per se, but it feels very unrelatable when all you're saying is like, I made this and I made that, and that's
Yeah.
great. But then people look at you in that sense and they're just kind of like,
I
oh, well,
can't
that's cool.
relate.
That's you. Like, I can't relate. I was teaching a storytelling masterclass on Monday, and the example I gave was, okay, would you relate more with a story that goes like this? Serena Williams wins her 23rd Grand Slam. Cool, great for her. That's great. She's amazing. Of
Yeah.
course, she's a beast. She knows what she's
Yeah.
doing. Or Serena Williams, from Compton to the courts, 10-hour days to her first Grand Slam. You're like, okay, well, if you read it, it's like, okay, where's Compton? Okay, cool. Maybe like low income neighbor. Now, I just made that title up. I don't even know if that's where she's from, but I don't even know that's how long she worked. But
Yeah.
when you look at that, it gives a little bit more context to why you're praising her for winning her first Grand Slam. You're basically saying, hey, she worked 10-hour days for 30 years to
Yeah.
to to win her first Grand Slam.
Yeah.
It's less about you even working 10-hour days, but you're like, if maybe you spent 3 weeks working on a project, you're like, well, I guess I can work a little bit harder because it took
Yeah.
her 30 years and she saw success. So it's really what the story does for the person who's listening to it or reading it. And
Mhm.
like you said, like they need to be able to put themselves in it. And I think one of the biggest things in the way we create content, right now, is we think less about the story and we think more about, like, I got to build authority and educate. And I'm like, yeah, but education only makes you look like you are mighty and whatever. And it doesn't make the person think that they can actually do what you've done yourself, you
Yeah.
know?
Okay, so
Yeah.
I love that. So I I feel like somebody may be listening and they're like, "Okay, I understand." So my stories need to be tailored around, my customer, my ideal target audience.
Hmm.
So how do I now make myself kind of like what you said, the authority or trustworthy, or that I actually, or like maybe that you should trust me to take you on to this new
Hmm.
journey. So not like, okay, yeah, you did it for you, but how do I know for sure that you can do it again for me?
Yeah. You have to add value. And I
Yeah.
know value is a very conflated word, but first of all, before we even go start adding value, you actually have to know your ideal person, like, to the core.
Yeah.
And this is not just knowing their age, their, giving them a name, knowing where they're from. Yes, it's cool to make sure that they can actually buy your services and they're earning enough money to do that. But knowing your ideal person to the core is really knowing, like, what are their desires? And also, not even just what their desires are, is also like, how do they talk about their desires?
Yeah.
Because somebody is starting their business will say, hey, I want to leave a legacy for my children. So another person could say, hey, I want to pay off debt, right? Another person can say, I want to make my first 6 figures. Everybody's desires of why they want to do something that you are able to deliver through your program is different. So
Yeah.
you need to be able to not only understand how your ideal person actually defines their goals and their desires. And it could be multiple things, right? And this is why, of course, on sales pages, you see like, oh, do you want blah, blah, and they like list off the desire.
Yeah.
After that, you actually have to know what they're struggling with. And not just in a very like broad way because of how you've seen somebody else describe what somebody is struggling with, but you actually have to know deeply why they're struggling with something. So when it came to content, jumping on the phone with a bunch of people, I think one of them was like, I don't know if I'm adding value in my content. Like, I'm creating content, but I don't know if it's valuable.
Yeah.
And getting on the phone with them, I was like, okay, cool. We can look at your content, but what makes you think it's not valuable? By the time we got on, like, we kind of dug a little bit deeper, it was fear. It was less about value and actually more about, I don't actually know if anybody's gonna listen to me, or actually I'm actually afraid of the actual the difference perspective that I have on this topic that everybody talks
Yeah.
about.
Wow.
And so if I didn't get on the phone with them, I would have been saying, oh, add value, instead of saying, hey, be okay with bringing a new perspective with your content that nobody else has brought. That will speak to that person that is willing to work with me, as opposed to, oh, add value. Everybody's telling you to add value.
Yeah.
No, now I'm telling you, hey, be okay with sowing seeds regardless of who, of like where it falls,
Yeah.
right? Because the person that you're speaking to will be able to relate to that perspective. And that's honestly, for me, that's the best way to really get the meat of how your person, speaks to something and how they talk about something. And obviously, once you understand them deeply in that case, so get on the phone with them, then you actually have to start, creating content around that, right?
Yeah.
So now you're creating content like, okay, fine. Like, it's like, let's say we're talking about content still, or even, let's say we're talking about content. For me, I've now started merging like my faith with my business. And so I see a lot of parallels in the Bible, and the Lord has given me a lot of connections. So instead of saying something like add value or just show up, I would say things like, hey, sow seeds, right? Or, we say something like focus on one person. But for me, the new perspective is, hey, instead of thinking about how afraid you are about showing up to create content, how about you sow seeds? And I can bring in a perspective of Mark 4, because Mark 4 is the farmer scatters seeds. He has no control over where it's going to land because we have different soils. He also has no control of what's going to be produced in the good soil. But what he has control over, just like each and every one of us when we show up on social media, is to show up, is to sow seeds. That's a different perspective.
It
I'm
is.
still saying the same thing of showing up. I'm just saying it differently. And so the whole point of adding value or educating or sharing your perspective is, how are you going to say that? And you're only going to know how to say it if you ask yourself what showing up means to you. Because showing up could mean very different things to different people. For
Yeah.
me, it means sowing seeds. For you, it could mean focusing on the one person. We're talking about the same topic, but we're saying it in two different ways.
Yeah.
But what I find oftentimes on social media is, because everybody is watching and consuming how everybody else is talking about a topic, is we completely discount our own brilliance. We completely discount our own experiences, completely discount our own perspectives and how we think about something. And we just follow the crowd. And we say, oh, if somebody's talking about focus on the one, okay, I'm going to talk about focusing on the one too. Hey, focus on the one. And maybe I'll change a few words and change a few phrases. I'm still saying the same thing. But it makes it hard for your ideal person to be like, oh, well, what makes you different from this person? I
Yeah.
don't really relate to what you're saying. But the issue is, a lot of people are afraid of being different. We want to be different. We're afraid of being different. We're
Yeah.
actually afraid of actually doing the different things. But that was a long-winded
No, I love that. I feel like you
answer.
said so many good things because I found myself like in my journey kind of doing similar things to what you just talked about. So I found myself like, okay, well, I see like this financial page, growing so fast. And I feel like I've been kind of around the same like follower count for a long time. Like, although we know that's vague, like it doesn't mean anything how many followers you have. So I found myself switching up my messaging and switching up the people that I wanted
Mm,
to attract. So I went from like for a phase there for maybe like a month, I went from like posting stuff about like financial advice and stuff to like career advice. And I'm like it ended up burning me out. And once I had to once I sat down and figured out, well,
that,
why am I burnt out? Well, it's because now you completely revamped your business to something that you're not even passionate about. I'm not passionate about helping you, revamp your resume and interview
mhm,
questions and benefits to look for. That's not the things that I do. And yeah, your page is growing, great for you, but that's like you said, that's your story. This is my story. I'm
mhm,
teaching you what to
mhm.
do with the money once you get it. So maybe we're working together somehow, some way, but we're saying completely two separate things. And the people that we're attracting are two separate things, or two separate people as well. And
Exactly.
I always tell people to, if you don't know what to say, it doesn't hurt to just get on the phone with people. I do that often. I'll send an email to my email list. Hey, you guys, right now I am interested in doing market research. Here's like 20 spots open, 20, like 15
Mhm.
to 20-minute spots open. If I can ask you some questions. And at the end, if you
Yeah.
need some like help, because, so people like to see, okay, well, what am I going to get out
Yeah.
of it? So
Absolutely.
yeah, if you have any questions for me, I'm here to, help. And it really does help out a lot.
It does. And I am so, I get very upset when I see content or people, coaches who say, oh, like, don't get on the phone with people, like X discovery calls. I'm like, yeah, you've already made your money.
Yeah.
What about people who are starting out? Like, so I think it's unfortunate, but that's the thing, right? It's like, this is the reason why we need people with different opinions. I've done discovery calls. I still do them, right? Most of the time. If somebody is trying to figure out, is if my services are a best fit for them, I let them, hey, this is not a coaching call, but we're going to talk about your vision. We're going to talk about what you want to do, and I can talk about how to support you. That is enough for me to even understand what they need, understand the language. I record those calls, I send it to them, but I also listen back for information. And that's the thing. It's funny because even biblically, right? Like, I forget what I was looking at it today. I forget what verse. I think it's probably First Corinthians or Second Corinthians, but it basically talks about like the fact that just like the seeds, like we're all co-laborers, right? Somebody like I've honestly, this is probably like very, very, very Bible based, but there's a multitude for those who are believers that are listening to your podcast, and a multitude of pastors and preachers and apostles and prophets and whatever. And it's funny because this year there were three different like prophets that I was like following, like decided to follow intentionally on social media. And I noticed that each of them had their thing.
Yeah.
Each of them had like what they like honed in on. One honed in on prayer, one honed in on meditation of the word, one honed in on like deeply studying the word.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like they're wrong. They just each had their own perspective. Why? Based on their experience,
Yeah.
based on the journey and the process that God took them through.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting when like the Lord brought this to mind and we're just like, hey, they're all doing the same thing, which is bringing people back to me. The
Yeah.
same way, there can be three different content strategists, three different money coaches, three different career coaches. We are all doing the same thing in the field, which is getting people to whatever the result is, but we're all doing it differently by honing in on the thing that we have been through. We're not discounting everything else about money that is,
Yeah.
wrong. They're not discounting. And, again, the person who's honed in on prayer still talks about the word, still talks about fasting. The person who's honed in on meditation still talks about fasting, still talks about prayer. The person who's honed in on, deeply studying the word still talks about fasting, still talks about prayer. But
Yeah.
what they emphasize is always based on their process. It doesn't mean they're wrong. It just gives, but that is how uniquely they've been able to exemplify, like, carve their own unique lane. And
Yeah.
the people that are connected to them or they're meant to serve will be attracted to them.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing with people who, and us really, when we're starting businesses, is that we're like, oh my God, this is for everyone.
Yeah.
This is absolutely for everyone. And I think everyone at every stage needs to join. And granted, there are some of these programs that everybody can join, everybody can be a part of. But that's why I said, I tell people, never this, your story is so powerful because out of your story, literally is your method and your message. It's literally something I teach. Like you can literally build your method and your message out of your story. But if you discount it and you think it's not important, or you go follow someone else, you go look at other people, not saying you shouldn't do competitive research or competitive analysis,
Yeah.
please do that. But when you discount your own experience and your own process to where you've gotten to, you literally just basically said that I'm trying to be like everybody else. I'm not trying to be unique the way that God created me. Because
Yeah.
if we really truly say that, God formed us and knit us together in our mother's womb and he wrote out all the details of our lives,
Yeah.
then do you really look at your experience and say, oh yeah, that's not important? Yeah, none of what I
Like
want,
you wouldn't have
none of
written
what I
it
want.
if it wasn't important. Yeah.
You have your money story because whatever you overcame is what you're supposed to use to build a business out of to help other people overcome it.
Yeah.
I have my branding, my teaching, my whatever story I have, because whatever I've overcome is what I'm supposed to use to teach other people,
Yeah.
right? And so I think to me, storytelling is deeper than even just storytelling on social media. It's like, don't discount the experiences you've been through because that's truly where your process is, really where the promise of what you're
Yeah.
going into and what you're offering people, that's where it's born out of. Right. I had a client who's in the health and wellness space. We just finished working together that literally compressed 17 years of her health and fitness story into a 26-week program. but it was all based on 17 years of a cycle of trying to lose weight for 17 years. I'm usually like, I'm just like, I was wowed by her story. But what would have happened if she was like, oh, well, I'm gonna just go be like every food and health and fitness coach out there?
Yeah.
But she's different and her experience is different. And so she had to build something different based on what she went through,
Yeah.
but yeah.
I love that, Viv. And then one thing that I hear people say all the time is that you do not have to have a rags to riches story. Like it's okay if things have been on the up and up your
I
entire
don't.
life. Yeah. Like I
Right.
do, but I'm like, everyone does it. And I feel like the people that I attract, like with my story, have that experience
Yeah.
too. So like it doesn't discount someone if they don't.
Yeah.
If everything has been smooth sailing, that's fine. Tell that story. There's other people
Yeah.
in life whose stuff has been smooth sailing that they might look at my story and like, girl, what? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I just keep going to, Victoria's Secret, or I just keep going to Starbucks and spending all my money. Like I don't have all those problems that you're talking about, which is
Yeah. Yeah.
fine. There's a coach for you. It may not just be me.
That, that,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the big things. And it's funny because it's basically the same thing that I talked about in this live that I was on today, but it's just like, not, yeah, you're right. Not everyone has a story of like, I was addicted or I hit rock bottom. And some people do, but it's like, and I used to be that way where I was just like, well, bro, like I kind of just stumbled into entrepreneurship. Like I didn't have a need for money. It just happened. But
Yeah.
there are people that relate to my story of just stumbling into entrepreneurship. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, well, I'm creative. And it wasn't until I started owning that people were like, well, me too. I also
Yeah.
stumbled into entrepreneurship. And so, yeah, can I add a little bit more like niceness to my story with the whole MCAT stuff? Well, that's actually, it is part of my story. And that is how I stumbled into it because I never thought this was going to be me. And exactly like what you said, I am the coach for that kind of person who's like, I can actually build something out of this. I can actually be creative.
Show me. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. Show me because you've done it. But then there are other people that are like, yo, I didn't have money and I started from nothing and I started to like create X, Y, and Z and like this product. And then from this product did this, did that.
Yeah.
They're the coach for somebody else who's probably in the trenches and is like, okay, I need an idea to work on right now. But
Yeah.
I'm more for people who are like, yo, I'm in the day-to-day routine of life, but I don't feel filled and I actually don't think I'm creative. But if you were able to find that from yourself, like, can you help me figure out where in my life, where in my experiences that I can actually pull something out of to build a business out of? That's my person,
Yeah.
right? I can't help you even to think of like, okay, I have no money and because my
Because that's
process
gonna
takes
stress me
time.
out. See, I
Exactly. My
work in
process
that
takes
field.
time.
Like that's my go field. Like when people come to me, like I at first I get stressed out, but I like shake it off. I'm like, come on, let's go. Because I've had to navigate
Mhm.
that before. Or maybe not like with my
Yeah.
business or like, hey, I'm down to my last, like figure out how I'm gonna do it with my business. But I can like, I can show you like how we can maneuver. What are some things that we can cut back on? Like what are some ways that we can,
Yeah.
have some additional streams of income coming in? Like I work well in that kind of like go, 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 go. I feel
Because
like I'm on
you've
my
been
last.
there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
See, I can't. I
Yeah.
would come to
You're
you if
like,
I were
Viv, don't
me.
look this way. Do
Uh,
not chaos.
don't look at
Chaos.
it, please. No, no. I would stress while you're stressing, and then we just
Okay.
both cry on the call, and then it'd be a all right, goodbye. Like I am
Yeah.
not the person for you. I'll pray for you. I mean, let God intervene, but that's about it, and that's about
Yeah.
it.
I know that's right. So it's just knowing. So like what it sounds like is knowing your story will know the people that it will end up attracting the people that you are called to work with. So that's great. And
Exactly.
so when we're talking about this, one thing that keeps sticking out to me is that it seems like this works well for service-based businesses. But can product-based businesses or do product-based businesses have a story to tell? Like let's say someone that's like selling
Absolutely.
art or selling apparel or have a clothing line, jewelry, hair care, things like that. Do they have a story?
Yes. And I think it's funny because like I'm like, this is the hill I'm willing to live on.
Yeah.
Everybody, service and product based, y'all go and tell stories in your content. But anyway,
Yeah.
we'll talk about that. I have some stuff in the works. But
All
the
right.
reason why I say yes is because like, especially for my product based business, I'm not like the biggest thing that really sets smaller or growing product based businesses over like the bigger companies is like the bigger companies have to manufacture a story. They got to bring it out of
Mm,
somewhere.
yeah.
Most of the story that is told is like the founder started from like the parents' investment or they came from some country and whatever.
Yeah.
But let's take the perfect example actually that I like to use is, I don't know if you ever you've used her products before. I haven't. Live Tinted.
No.
So Live Tinted is a beauty brand, and I don't want to butcher her name. I believe her name is Deepika Mutwala. She's Indian American, and she first started as a beauty YouTuber.
Okay.
And she started as a beauty YouTuber, and she had this beauty video go out. This YouTube video go viral because she was using, I believe it was red lipstick under, like in her under eye, because she had really deep under eye
Okay.
bags.
I've seen this video before. Yes.
Yes. And so basically, like, she started Live Tinted, first of all, with what she called hue sticks as a way to have, not because obviously, like, lipstick is damaging. We don't actually know what's on lipstick and you're putting it under your eyes, but that was what worked for her then. And so basically, she's grown and built Live Tinted for the brown girls, right? Mostly Indian girls, again, and white girls and black girls can still use the products, but mostly Indian girls, based on that attribute of like, yo, this is why I started this, because nothing is, either I pack a bunch of concealer under my eyes and it still looks deep, or I put this, red lipstick under and it kind of works, but I know that it's actually going to damage my eye in a long term. So she decided to put together a product that will actually help that, right? The beauty about the story, especially with product based businesses, there is no end. There's just a bunch of pivots. So now from Hue Stick, she's created a bronzer, she's created a body glow shimmery thingy. I forget what it's called. She's created lipsticks. She's created sunscreen. But it started from a story of something that she didn't have, or she saw a gap in the industry. And
Yeah.
so the thing about product-based businesses, we love, it's like people build products and they're like, oh, this is the product that I'm going to build. There's not a story around it, so there's no avenue for you to be able to, like, to jump out of, or for you to kind of continue
Yeah.
to build on. So she's the perfect example, because even if you look at her page, she talks a lot of things. She talks about, her content ranges from, like, yes, talking about ways to use sunscreen or ways to use a hue stick and bringing a lot of kind of user generated content, but she also talks a lot of relatable content about, what your Indian parent says to you if you go out late at night, or rituals Indian parents do, right, when you're pregnant, or so, just things that relate to the community. Because the thing about a product is that it, product or a service, whatever it is, it's a movement.
Yeah.
And for a movement to actually work, you need community, right? And for people to actually buy, to facilitate like conversions, and to actually buy from you, you need something that they're willing to like. I'm good. Obviously, the quality of your product, don't get me wrong, like, quality of it needs to be top notch, but they also need to rally behind you, because in the sea of under eye concealers and hue sticks or whatever, they're going to pick Live Tinted because, like, she speaks to us. She's our people's,
Yeah.
right? She's our person, and that's the thing about product-based business. It does work a little bit differently with service-based business, but product-based business still needs stories, and not your surface level. Oh, we have this charity that we're connected to, so if you buy,
Right.
proceeds are going to go there. No, 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 no. I want to know why you started this product. Why out of all the products and the seas of products did you start a candle line? Why did you start a wax line? Why did you start a wine glass line? Why did you start a lipstick line? Like, why did you start a glass line? Like, I need to know why.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. That's the reason why a lot of product-based businesses feel like they don't, like, they can only just sell their product, is because their why isn't deeper than money. And I think people have this misconception that if my why isn't because I want to make money, then I'm not going to make money. It's like, no, you're serving people, so I want to know why you want to serve
Yeah.
them. And if nobody's buying your product but you believe in your product, like, you're going to talk about it. I want to see you get excited about what you're building. I want to see you get excited about, what you're offering me. I just had a content strategy VIP day, which is basically what I work on with people. And this wig maker, her brand is called Brand New Me. And basically, like, she had a whole story on how she started with wig making, but she also had hair growth oil. And it's funny because when I was doing her research and she shared her goals, I made a little point in my research and my notes, and I was just like, I forgot what I was writing, but I was like, could possibly come out with her own shampoo and conditioner line. I just put it there. And in the middle of our conversation, I was like, hey, this was super random, but did you ever think about like starting your own like shampoo or conditioner line? She was like, yeah. How did you know? I was like, oh, from what you've
Holy
told
Spirit.
me about
Yeah.
yeah, I was like, from what you've told me about what your vision and the story behind your brand, if you stick with this and create a movement out of helping people become brand new people, there is a potential for you to be able to start this. But if you pigeonhole yourself to only being just a regular wig maker, you just making a bunch of wigs and you show people that's cool, that's great, you would kind of have to do a little bit more extra work with launching a shampoo line. So it's strategic with product-based businesses. You have to start right, and your content has to always be geared towards like a main message. But definitely product-based businesses can and should
Yeah.
have a story. Like, I don't want you to see you sell, like sell, but I also want you to see, like, I want to know why you're doing this, because I need to know, like, if another wig maker comes on the line, I'm loyal for a reason. And
Yeah.
so you need to ask yourself, what would make my customers be loyal to me, even outside of the quality of my product?
Yeah.
You know,
I love that. And I'm like in this mentorship, and one thing that like with the budgetista, I absolutely love her. So and but it's like she
yeah.
talks about like branding and stuff sometimes. So
Hmm.
one thing that she said to us is that no one is going to buy stuff just to make you richer. So if you're like, buy this, buy this, buy this, why? Because I'm selling it. Well, that doesn't benefit me. Like what we talked about in the beginning, the person wants to see that they are the hero in the story. So, okay, yeah,
Exactly.
buy my jewelry. Why? Because I know that you like to look nice when you go to the gym, or I know that you don't like to have to take off your jewelry to go to the gym because you're
Hmm.
afraid that it's going to tarnish or turn your wrist or green. So if you buy this, actually, I'm alleviating that stress. That could be one of the reasons why, not
Exactly.
just because
Exactly.
I'm selling it and this is why. Or you can even tell, like, okay, a lot of people that have product based businesses, I'm assuming you might go through a phase where, okay, I'm trying this material and that material, and
Hmm.
I'm feeling it. And I'm trying to figure out which one feels best,
Yes.
and I'm trying it out and in different settings and stuff. And so even maybe talking about why you picked this material over that material.
Over
What was
the
the
other.
feeling? Yeah.
Exactly. I always tell people, like, it's when you're posting content, always think like process and product. Like, yes, share your product, share the finished product. It's always great. But also share your process. A lot of people look at the process of how they do certain things, especially product-based businesses, as almost kind of like insignificant. Like, it's not, you can't document it or you can't share it on social media. But in order for me to trust you, I actually want to know the effort that you're putting into actually building this. Like, I know you see the Fenty and the Fenty skins and all that stuff, and they put out a product and everybody's
Yeah.
rushing it and buying it. But if you think about it, like, the reason why people show, what it feels like, what it looks like, the before and after, those are all stories,
Yeah.
right? Even making connections in your day to day, like you said, the whole like jewelry line, like, actually, like, take a video of you using the jewelry, like, hey, this is a jewelry day 1, this is jewelry day 10, and day
Yeah.
50 it's the same jewelry. Or getting a review from someone. What's the testimonial? It's a testimony, it's a story. Like,
Yeah.
stories are everywhere.
There
And
is.
so one of the beautiful things is that I actually think about, like, okay, am I posting too much of my product, and should I actually start posting more of my process? Post your product, like, hey, buy now, 50% off, buy, like, cool, but also post your process. So, like you said, people can understand why. Like, even for service-based businesses, so people like, oh, why is your program 3 months versus 5 months? People ask themselves that question. Okay, why is your product $50, but that person is 30? You have to explain why these things
Yeah.
happen. Why your product is $50, or why you're using this material, or why you're making it in China versus the United States, or why shipping takes longer, or again, why, as cliche as it sounds, is literally going to be your best friend. And
Yeah.
the more whys you can ask yourself when you talk about your whatever product or service it is that you're putting out, the more you'll be able, like, the deeper the trust is going to be with your audience, whether it's service or product based. And then now the question is, you have to tie it back into what you want to be known for.
Yeah.
Because for my client, the wig person, she actually wanted to be known as an educator. She wanted to educate people. Yeah, she wanted to sell her wigs, but
Yeah.
she also wanted to help people maintain their wigs. And I was like, yo, I'm your customer because I don't know how to maintain my wigs.
Okay.
It takes me
I wish I'd
years.
known
Like,
her before I
girl,
locked my hair because, girl,
girl,
I needed that.
this one took me like hours. I was like, Lord, you know what? I'm just like send it off to somebody to go take care of it.
Okay.
But she wanted to be known beyond just making wigs and people buying her wigs. She wanted to be known as a person who helped people maintain their wigs, but also
Yeah.
grow their natural hair under their wigs. Because
Yeah.
how many people actually just like forget about their natural hair under their wigs when they wear wigs? I am. And
Yeah.
so these are all the things. And so, for the product based business and even for the service based business, before even doing anything, because of the perception you're trying to build with your audience, ask yourself, what do I want to be known for?
Yeah.
And once you are able to deeply answer that question, the story of why and what and where you started and the vision you were taking them on will flow from that.
Yeah.
But if what you want to be known for is not merging with how people are perceiving you, then you got to find a disconnect. And the disconnect is usually the story that you're telling.
Yeah. I love it. I have one last question. One last question
Okay.
before we go.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Shoot.
and then we're going to get into the lightning round, which is just like 3 fun questions. They're mindless.
Oh,
Uh,
Lord.
my last question is, so social media is like going away from the pictures and the like I was killing it. Like like I can storytell that way, like, put a picture and then like storytell in the
Mm-hmm.
captions. But
Mm-hmm.
it's moving away from still photos to short form videos.
Yeah.
So, does that mean the way we're telling our story needs to shift with the new things, or are we still good to go telling our stories in that same way? Like, how does it look telling a story using video? Like, do we have to now I keep hearing people talk about content, like a part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. Like, what's the T?
I wouldn't really do like that's very like hack like and tactic like, and I'm not a fan of stuff like that. But does it change? Yes. I'm not going to say like it doesn't. Is there a difference between writing a long caption and telling a story there? And by the way, I still write long captions. I still tell stories in that way.
Yeah.
So whether Instagram decides to take it down or not, I'm gonna still do it, and my engagement is still good. So I'm still keep.
Okay.
I'm gonna stick to it.
Yeah.
But in terms of video, the way it will be different. But I like people to think about, if you can write out your caption, think of that as a script that you can then
Mm.
tell on video,
Yeah.
right? Now, you also have to ask yourself, once you tell that story on video, are you willing to make, are you willing to kind of showcase it, like not showcase the video, but like film it, like different parts of things that you're doing to tell that story, because that's one way. Or willing, for me, like the way I say, the easiest way is to sit down, face camera, and talk, right? Now,
Yeah.
obviously, the way you structure it, the hook, and the like I said, the hook and the lesson and the conflict and everything, and the resolution and the CTA at the end, that's a structure that you obviously have to stick to, that we already do in written form. But it's a lot like it's really more relaxed in written form, because there's a lot of things that you can do.
Yeah.
But in video form, especially if you're trying to do it in video, there's a lot of stuff that you have to get, like that hook in the beginning, so that first sentence is going to be very important. But even like the first few seconds to like, for like, no pun intended, to reel somebody in,
No.
right, is what's needed to get them to keep talking,
Yeah.
right? And so it does change, but basically you can transfer one to the other. And I do agree with the kind of episode, like the episodic content, but more like I prefer just doing series. And so something I've done, like I did it last month, is kind of bring a broad topic. So I did something called the Reset series, right? And so it was just basically different topics, biblically based, brought people who were in businesses that have achieved so much. And it was really all about like resetting your heart and your mind to the Lord before you go start building your business, or before you continue building your business,
Yeah.
right? And so that was just, again, a series with one major topic, one major goal, one major outcome that I wanted for people, and then different topics that basically stemmed from that. So I believe more in that than a part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, kind of like
Yeah.
on one topic, which, yes, you can break down and that's great. But if you can do like a live series over the month, once every week, and it's basically one episode or the other that basically builds on each other,
Yeah.
that's going to work best for you, especially if at the end of the monthly episode, you have something that you're launching, after. And so that's something that I would highly encourage for people, is to kind of think of a series, a main topic. So a friend of mine did it. So we're in October, September. So she did hers, I believe it was August, and she did like a content detox. So
Yeah.
it was a random campaign, and she's like, okay, all the things you need to detox, from doing, and it was all content related. So she had like copycat content, she had, DIY, doing all your content yourself. She had launching mistakes. So she had all the different things related to content as it related to her ideal person,
Yeah.
right? So don't go bringing up a topic that does not relate to your ideal person.
Yeah.
And then that's what she then basically, over the course of, I believe it was August or September. I think it was August, because it was my brother. It was August. Basically, created a series on that, and basically at the end, she was promoting what she had. I think it was a three-ish 4-day workshop called Content Clinic, and so that is what I highly recommend doing. And it could be anything. It could be related to, so February is coming up, and one of the ideas that I had for a series was all on love, but basically understanding this is probably not necessarily really related to like building your brand, but I guess it really does, but like understanding different perspectives of God's love for us. So that's a broad topic, but then being able to bring guests on live to be able to talk about that,
Yeah.
as it relates to it, and having one goal of what I want people to take away from it. So that's what I would do with video. But one last thing that I would say though is, I do understand what Instagram is doing, and I understand a lot of platforms are moving to like short form videos, or even just videos in general. And a lot of people are switching the way they tell stories. But I always say, like, how are you gifted to express yourself? Because not everybody's comfortable talking on camera. Like, I love to talk, so I would talk for hours. Just like,
Yeah.
that's what the Lord has deposited in me. But I also like to write. So what if somebody has, is really, really, really gifted in writing, but is not too comfortable talking? They can find a platform that will benefit them, and they can attract people that actually like to read, right? Or you can figure out, if you do want to stay on Instagram, what are some ways that you can actually merge whatever Instagram is promoting and the way that you actually like to express yourself, and do that. And so I don't always advise people to change up their strategy completely,
Yeah.
because like you said, you want to make sure it's actually sustainable, and it's something that they can actually do long term, because it would honestly be a disservice to them to start something and then be burnt out 2 weeks later, because you're like, yo, this is too much for me and I want to go back to what I was doing.
Yeah.
I'd rather somebody build their business and build their reputation on what their strengths are, what they're really good at, what their gifts are, as opposed to because they're trying to please a platform. So
Love it.
mhm.
Viv, this was so good. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much for
for
sharing
having me.
expertise with us. So we're going to get, a lot of
Yeah.
people call it the lightning round, but over here, since we talk about money and business and faith, we call it the money round. So I have 3 questions for you. My first
Okay.
is, what's a book that you've read in the past that's helped like shift your perspective on either business or money?
I actually haven't read any books in the last year.
The Bible.
I'm not gonna
I
lie. Actually,
read that
honestly, it's the Bible, to be honest. I have not read any book in the last year except for the Bible. So yeah, that's all I got. Sorry, y'all.
But let's not dilute that, because there's so many
Yeah.
teachings. And actually this year I purchased my very first physical Bible. I've never had a physical Bible. I've always done it, on my phone, or, as a kid, my grandma got me those, kitty Bibles, but it wasn't
Hmm.
the real thing. And
Yeah.
like just having it in your hand and turning the pages and like, and highlighting it makes
Yeah.
a huge difference. Like, I don't
It
know,
does.
I can't put a word to it, or I can't really explain it, but it's a difference. And there's so
It
many
does.
teachings in there that teaches you about
There is.
business. So that is the book. So
Yes.
that's the go-to
Yes.
book.
Yeah.
Love it. So my next question is, majority of my audience are the go-to person in their family or friend group. So what is something that you do to help refill your cup so that you're not always pouring, from an empty cup?
Take naps.
Take
I'm
naps.
the nap. I'm the nap queen.
Yes.
And everybody knows, even since I was little, my dad will be like, don't bother her. She's sleeping.
Yeah.
She's
I'm that too.
sleeping. I'm
That's
always, and because I'm the go-to person, I literally schedule my naps. And so like, I'm just like, okay, I'm tired, 6 to 7. That's when we're napping.
I'm telling
Like,
you.
take that nap. Like, they'll be okay. They will
Yes.
be okay.
Yes, love it. My last one is, what would you say to someone that may be listening who maybe feels like giving up because life just isn't going exactly how they planned just yet? So
Mm-hmm.
maybe they're 25-year-old Viv, where they just got the door shut. What would you say to that person?
Oh, I don't like saying cliche things like trust the process, but that honestly is, you're not always going to be in the same position. I think for me, that's what I would tell her, you are not always going to be here. And that's what I remind myself every day. Like, I'm not always going to be here, but what I do today will determine where I'm going to be tomorrow.
Mm,
Because for a lot of times, there's when we feel like giving up, we feel like throwing in a towel because we can't do anything else ourselves. We have to also think about the fact that we're also taking on the responsibility of what God is supposed to be doing for us.
yeah.
We are meant to yield and live life from Him. And 9 times out of 10, when we feel like giving up and when we're stuck, is because we have put the burden on ourselves that we are meant to give to God. And so give it back to God. So you're not always going to be here. Give the burden back to God and allow Him to lead you in your next steps.
Yeah, I love it. That's an amazing way to close us out. So before we leave, just share it with us. Where can we find you? Like what are
Yes.
some things that you have coming up in the works that we need to be, on the lookout about? Someone that wants to
Yes.
like listening to this and they're like, listen, Viv is my person. I want to work with her. Where do we go?
Yeah, so I've obviously have a couple of things, but so depending on when this episode is going to air, I'm going to have a freebie on storytelling coming out, and so that should be out in a few weeks. But I am reopening doors to my membership slash signature program in January. And so we'll have a great event, which I'm actually having next week, called Reset Your Vision. And for me, that event is basically like the foundational elements of building your business God's way. And so, what does God have to say about your identity, your creativity, and how to do business His way? And so, we have that great event. It's next week, but I'm going to host another one in January, just in preparation for the launch of the course. And honestly, anyone that doesn't join, but you join just that, like, that's an event that I've seen that just keeps on giving. At least that's what my clients say. So I'm
With the
excited for that. But
reset,
yeah,
the
with
reset. Okay.
the reset your vision. But yeah, honestly, just follow me on social media at the VO guy. That's honestly where you see me going live, you see me post content.
Yeah.
That's just my thing. I love to always talk. So just joining on the conversation. DM me any questions that you have. I'm super open to just, chatting with people. And of course, anyone who's very like content specific, so you don't need help to actually build your brand, but you need help with your content. Obviously, I have a content strategy VIP that I talked about that during the episode, and so we can always figure out if that works for you, and then we can get things rolling. Yeah,
Yes. Thank you so much, Viv. We really
thank
enjoyed you.
you.
And you guys, if you are looking for her, find her over on Instagram. I'll have everything
Yes,
like that she mentioned in the show notes. So I already got you all covered. So just view the show notes and you can find it there. Thank you guys so much for sticking with
yes.
us. Bye.
Thank you.